Hey everybody, today I'm going to be making this video to talk about APEC, the United States and China, and just other things like trade, tariffs, and interest rates, and just some political and economic news that I just want to go over. None of this is financial advice, please do your own research. Anything I've ever said, anything I will continue to say is just my opinion, and should just be taken as a joke. I mean, my views are constantly wrong and they're constantly changing because, well, I mean, it's I don't know. Sometimes I just get more information and then my views change. So, with that being said, I want to talk about APEC. Start this out by talking about APEC because one of the biggest news that we have currently going on is that Trump and Xi are going to be meeting up. And so, why this is so important for someone like me is because, as someone who invests in Chinese companies and someone who tries to find opportunities in the markets where things are, in my opinion, heavily overvalued, right? You have like the AI bubble. I'm constantly looking for opportunities. So for me, how I invest is that, like, I look at the macroeconomics of things and geopolitics, and I try to figure out where the world is heading and what direction, and then I try to look for companies that I think are, at a good deal, and I try to find out whether or not these companies can benefit from like the macroeconomic changes and the geopolitical changes. So as the world is changing, I try to find out like where my specific company that I'm interested in, that I think is a good deal, where it can position itself and how it's positioning itself to whether it's going to benefit from it or not. So with that being said, when it comes to Donald Trump and Xi Jinping meeting, in my honest opinion, I think a lot of these governments, business elites, high-ranking politicians, presidents, they're probably having backdoor meetings all the time and backdoor deals all the time, conversations all the time. Like, I don't think it's too far-fetched to believe that a lot of the global economy is sort of planned out and mapped out. We have parameters in which we can work from, but like we're generally heading towards the same direction no matter what. And this is because we're in a very fragile world, where if we make mistakes, there's nuclear destruction, or if we make mistakes, then there's going to be mass famine, or if we make mistakes, then there's going to be like societal collapses, right? Because that's just how fragile this world is. And things like the things that happened in 2020 or previous wars or other outbreaks, I don't want to get too much into that because I don't want to be, censored. But yeah, when things like that happen, it just shows us how fragile things are, right? So like if one country gets into a war with another, like a border dispute of some sort, or even just a war, it causes mass migration out of these countries, which can really promote destabilization. So the world is really fragile, okay? And people in the United States and more developed countries don't really see like how fragile this world truly is. But yeah, this world is very, very fragile, okay? So, I mean, let's just look at how fragile it is real quick, okay? So, let's just say you have in the South Americas, you have like some kind of war, or just sanctions will economically decimate countries, or trade barriers that really hurt countries. Well, you can't guard this entire border of the United States and prevent people from coming in. Okay, if they're migrating out of these countries because of like economic or political instability, which you basically, there's no contagion, so you can't contain economic crises. You cannot contain like political or war crises. Like, it becomes very difficult to do these types of things. I mean, some are manageable, right? But a lot of times in a globalized economy where things are connected through trade and economics, and how everything is so interconnected, which is good. It promotes people to work together. And maybe to honor the UN Charter. But yeah, when you have things like the UN Charter, it helps people keep onto like a stable path of like global development. So So yeah, with that being said, when it comes to things like APEC, they mean a lot symbolically, I think, where trade deals are made and discussions are made. But honestly, investors and Wall Street, or just people who are mindful of the economy and geopolitics, if you're an investor, for example, you might have already invested in the Hang Seng a long time ago, based on like your own ideas of like how the world will develop over time. So I bought heavily into the Hang Seng here. And so the reason why I bought Hang Seng at the 52-week lows is because I had a lot of conviction for what I believed in at the time. Like, I thought that the United States was in a weaker position when it came to negotiations of economic deals or trade deals. I also realized and believed that a lot of the saber rattling between the two countries is mostly noise, right? You can use saber rattling and foreign boogeymaning of different countries to like act as a lightning rod for like domestic issues. So like let's just say the United States is making like large economic reformations to handle the global supply and demand side of China integrating itself into the global economy even more, especially when it comes to exports and imports, okay, of like high value goods that the United States has generally dominated. If you have something like that, the United States has to make like reformations structurally in order to handle those changes. So because of that, you have the United States is in a position, I mean, this is not entirely accurate, but it's 2024. The United States is in a position where it has to make structural reforms, and this takes, well, macro movements like this take some time. It cannot be done overnight. So maybe you can have like the AI bubble or the electric vehicle bubble or the internet bubble or tech bubbles or whatever hold up like a large portion of your elderly demographics that rely on pension funds, 401ks, asset bubbles, so they can have like some form of like UBI in a sense. And then your working class age, like anywhere from like 18, 16 to, I don't know, before retirement age of 62 or 65, these people take on the burden of riskier assets, higher appreciation valued assets as well, harder entrance into things like the S&P, the stock market, housing and homes, and just assets in general. When this demographic no longer is with us, the older, when they die off, it does free up some resources depending on how things are done. It depends on government policies and like economic changes and how things as a society unfold. We'll see over time whether or not there is some kind of like trickle down effect from this demographic, the older demographic, the boomers, to the youngers. We'll see if policies can promote a freeing up of resources and deflationary effects. But until then, the working class has to kind of prop up the thing or burden the asset bubbles. So yeah, when it comes to China and the United States, I always felt like if you are someone who keeps up with things, you can sort of time bottoms in a sense in things like the Hang Seng, mainly because you have a lot of conviction built up for like when you think something's a really, really, really good value. So at this point in time, when the Hang Seng bottomed here, I was buying heavily. Okay, I was buying heavily into the Hang Seng. A lot of Chinese stocks that have done very, very well this year. And what I was thinking before Trump became president was I'm going to invest in small caps that can benefit from lower interest rates. I think that tariffs can eventually be reduced over time, especially because I think Trump wants to probably end his term as being the president who brought deflation to some extent, made a great deal of China and Asia, and created a lot of job opportunities and just, yeah, a lot of like economic growth. Okay. So, yeah, I think a lot of investors in China have sort of had a better understanding or more early on how to view United States and China relationships because they needed to build that conviction to buy into stocks and equities that a lot of the United States and Westerners were saying were really, really risky. And if you didn't listen to the noise and you bought in because you thought it was a good deal, you would have done really, really well. And generally it's like that for a lot of equities, right? When they want you to buy, they will tell you to buy even if it's not a good deal. If they want you to sell, they'll encourage you to sell, right? So, with that being said, I think personally, yeah, the world is developing with consideration to things like international frameworks, the UN Charter, APEC, nuclear weapons, mutually assured destruction, the difficulties of contagions. The world is going to be developing in one direction, which is like north, and there's like no way of stopping that. So I'm betting on that, and you can bet against that, but you're either betting on World War III and nuclear destruction where 5 billion plus people die, or you're placing a gamble on the world developing in a somewhat stable way with a lot of hiccups along the way, and people trying to profiteer along the way, or people trying to oppose their own will. But I just don't see things changing. I think that the world has already planned out how it's going to be developing because of how fragile it is. I mean, think of it like an aquarium. If you have an aquarium, like a 10-gallon fish tank or a 50-gallon fish tank, for example, the ecosystem can be damaged really, really easily. So like if one fish dies in that, it can massively devastate your fish aquarium. If you overfeed it or underfeed it, or if there's too much sunlight, or if the filters stop working, like it can just destroy your fish tank really easily. And that's just how the world is today. It's much harder to be isolationist, and I don't think it's going to happen. So yeah, I think Trump's going to be the president that is going to promote more globalization, more interconnectedness, and I think a lot of this, the anti-China rhetoric, is just a front, because Trump has been saying he wants Chinese foreign direct investments into our economy to help revitalize a lot of the areas that really could use it. And we saw this in the 70s and 80s and 90s between the United States and Japan. A lot of that is happening today, except at a much different scale, mainly because China just has a much larger population. But even if Japan has a smaller population and is a smaller geographical location, the types of earners and incomes that you have is different. So like even if China has 1.3 billion plus people or so, and Japan has I think around I think it was like 300,000, or was it at 100? I should know this. Okay, so yeah, Japan has 124 million, right? And in the 70s they had maybe around 100 million or something. Even if that's the case, and China has 1.3 billion or so, it's still something that was still competing with the global economy. So China might be doing that at a larger scale. So someone like Janet Yellen will say it's called, or Westerners will say it's overcapacity, even though it's not. It's just economic efficiency, in my opinion. Things have to be done in a way that like everybody wins. Okay, so yeah, the world is so fragile. You can't fight over things like Taiwan. Okay, it's just and how we look at Taiwan too should really be reconsidered. Like, is there bonds from a long time ago, or does Taiwan benefit as its current state of ambiguity? I'll go into that later, but does the situation between the United States, Taiwan, and China currently benefit everyone right now? And I would say maybe. So why change it? What the populace thinks, what you and I think, what the average person thinks, is probably much different from the political and business elites. And what business elites and political elites are completely different from what the general population thinks. Like a lot of Westerners and a lot of Americans, working class, may be trained to hate China today or Japan in the 90s and 70s and 80s, or the Middle Easterns, or African. It doesn't matter, right? Like, or the global South, right? But even if individuals are trained this way, because maybe it like alleviates a lot of pressure that can be used towards the government and political and business elite, and it casts it onto like racial and class wars and things like that amongst each other. Maybe it makes it easier to divide and conquer instead, rather than look at our institutions and society. Or maybe it makes it harder for the laboring class to unite, right, and make structural changes that may destabilize things. So you can point to foreign boogeymen instead, that don't really care and have nothing to really do with your problems, and they may not even really be enemies of the state. So, do I think that Trump and Xi Jinping really dislike each other? No, they probably love each other. I mean, it doesn't even matter. As a whole, like, there may be factions that within the countries that may not like each other, but I think as a whole, they generally, as countries, if you look at the trade data, they're like best friends and they need each other. I think China is in a much stronger position to bargain, though, mainly because I think that the Chinese can handle economic hardships much better than average Americans. I also think that the economic structures and societal structures benefit harder times, right? This can be because of like national identity or structural economic formats, for example. I don't really want to get too much into that, but yeah, it makes it much easier. And also too, it's with China having a lot of the means of production, it means that if you want to, you can promote deflation through production and then selling it to your own people and then promoting consumption. But at the end of the day, if I were the world leader, this is what I think should happen, and I actually think this is probably what's going to happen. I would tell the United States and China to make economic and structural, political, and social reforms that can better honor the UN Charter, that can help emerging economies, that can increase the global money supply, that can increase credit for emerging economies. I would tell them to offshore some production to developing countries that can really use these types of things, like for infrastructure, and then increase efficiency. And then I would tell them that it would be really hard onto the populace that have to burden a lot of the economic and structural changes. So like the lower you are economically and societally, the more you're going to feel burdened and strained by these changes. So I would tell them to blame like a different country, mainly because I don't know if they can really handle like, hey guys, we need to do this for the greater good of everything. Like, no, I don't think they care enough. I think people, I think, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's something to think about. But anyway, I think that's probably what's going to happen. So, yeah, these trade deals, Donald Trump and Xi Jinping, they've probably been talking a lot. And, businesses to businesses talk all the time. And that's where it really matters, right, on a micro level. But yeah, I'm pretty sure like high officials, business elites have been talking to each other for a long time. So China dangles a $1 trillion investment bid to reset the United States trade policy. Yeah, so maybe I will, let me see, what time is it? I'll probably do this on the next video then.